Good Monday morning, everyone. Trust everybody's made it back home and doing well and ready to get into the rest of the course. I have to apologize to you. I'm on a learning curve when it comes to making videos and everything, and I did a 45-minute lecture yesterday, and I've tried to upload it to YouTube only to find out after several hours that it won't take anything over a 15-minute video. So I'm going to have to redo this and try to streamline my lecture. It may be in more than one part in order to get through it. But we're looking at navigating change, and I'll refer you to the syllabus to review the page numbers that you need to be reading in the course textbook. But you'll remember that the authors we talked about change models, and we went through Lowen's change model of unfreezing, changing, and refreezing, and then Kotter's 8 steps. And then I discussed the change model that the authors set forth, the 5 steps in their change path model. And today we're going to touch on the first 2 steps. The first one is awakening. And in order to do that, we need to understand how to navigate through the organizational structure and the system. And you'll recall that structures within organizations vary. We have the hierarchical mode, and then we have the flatter modes that exist. And you'll recall that the hierarchical structures tend to be more formal and sluggish, and therefore are not the better models in today's organizational structures. But we also need to be aware that even though there may be formal structures, there are also informal structures within every organization. There are people of power who may not have position, but yet they are very influential and have a voice in the organization, even though they may not have an official title or even recognition. So we need to be aware of those things. And then with regard to the systems within that organization, is the organization large, or is it small? Does it have a complex system, or is it more simple? Obviously, organizations develop over time, and the complexity of that organization may vary greatly depending upon the age of the organization, depending upon the size of the organization. So all of these things need to be taken into consideration. Now, some of the core concepts within structure and systems, the author points out, number one, differentiation. That is the subdivision of tasks. Who's going to do what in this change that we're initiating? The integration of that change, coordinating the various jobs among the departments and teams within the organization. What about the chain of command? Who do I need to report to, and so on. Then finally, not finally, but a span of control. Who do I influence, and who do the people that I report to influence? And so what is the control that I have within that organization, and how far does that control span? Then they point out number 5, centralization and decentralization. How are decisions made, and who's making those decisions? Understanding those kinds of things. And then finally, the formal and the informal. The structure that exists, is it really followed? I noted a moment ago that there are people in positions of power that are not influential, and people who are influential who do not have positions of power. So it's important that we are able to distinguish those things and understand them. Then we need to understand information systems within the organization. How does information flow? Is it always a top-down hierarchical situation, which in many kingdom-oriented organizations it probably or very well could be that way. And this is because primarily this is the way it's always been. And these organizational ideas of structure being flatter are not always common within kingdom-oriented organizations. So, how does the information flow? Does it flow only vertically, that is top down, or is there a horizontal flow of information? I feel like I'm rushing through this because I've got to make sure that I get this done within 15 minutes. So you'll please excuse me. The other one was quite a lot longer. How does the structure and system within that organization align with the environment? Now, the environment is a broad term, and there are several environments. There's an environment within the organization, that is the people, the culture, attitudes, and the perceptions. What is the vision and the values and the needs of the organization? So all of those things create environment. And then that expands from departments, to teams, to organizations. There's an environment within every one of those things. Smaller groups may tend to be lax, and larger groups may tend to be more formal. So environments shift within the organization, and it's important that we are able to distinguish those things. In a church setting, a youth group environment would be much different than a senior adult environment. So when we navigate change, we have to be aware of the overall organizational environment, as well as the global environment within which the organization exists. So keep those things in mind. Then, how do these systems and structures advance change? Understanding the organizational structure and system gives us the ability to leverage our influence in conducting change. So we need to make sure that we take advantage of areas that we can take advantage of. And one of the things that we need to do when we're considering change and leverage within the organization is making certain that this change initiative aligns with the vision, goals, and the strategies of the organization. If the change that we're bringing about doesn't align with those key components of the organization, it's going to be very difficult to go forward with that change. So things that we need to keep in mind as we're going through this change is, number one, who approves the change initiative? Who is going to be the final say-so? Secondly, is there a formal approach that needs to be followed in order to initiate change? Some organizations may have a formal approach and documentation that has to be made. More lax or smaller organizations may not require that. It may be just a meeting in order to determine what's going to take place. Then we also need to understand the attitudes of the stakeholders and what is their thoughts regarding the change initiative. Does the change initiative correlate with the overall organizational vision and goals? And then what is the process to legitimize the change initiative? So these are things that we must keep in mind. Now, understanding the structure and the system gives us the ability to leverage that structure and system so that we can advance. And so it's very important that we keep those things in mind. Now, there are different approaches when we advance change initiatives. Some organizations have pretty much a straightforward, rational approach. That is, it's formal. There are documents that need to be completed. There's a chain of command that has to review all of these things and then make certain that it's followed and it's incremental in its steps. A second way that's a little slower is building coalitions. That is, gathering information, perhaps even establishing a pilot program where we launch this change initiative in one department just to see how it works. So this is something that we do to create some momentum in the change process. And then there's what the authors call the renegade approach, and that is the just do it approach. Now, I would be very careful in doing this within an organization, especially if there's any structure or system at all. People don't like change, and as I said before, if you're going to move the piano from one side of the platform to the other, you move it 1 inch a month, and then over time it'll be moved. But just going in and turning the tables upside down and making change is not a wise thing to do, and I've seen many pastors do it only to end up shooting themselves in the foot. So going through this change process enables us to understand the structure and the system and how that structure and system will help us to advance the change that we're going through. Now, because of time, I need to move forward and go to the second step of the author's 5-step model, and that is mobilization. And they discuss the need to understand the politics and the culture of the organization. Now, power is always involved in politics, and Robert Greenleaf is the theorist for servant leadership, and in his book called The Power of Servant Leadership, which I would highly recommend that you purchase and have in your library if you don't already have so, he says that there's 3 types of power: coercive power, which is imposing your power upon others; manipulative power, which manipulates people to do things; and then persuasive power, and that is leading people and helping them to understand that what you're doing is legitimate and that they're doing it for the right reasons. So coercive power, manipulative power, and persuasive power. Now, the authors in your textbook say that there are positional power, the power dynamics within an organization, positional power, networking power, knowledge power, and personality power. And those are pretty much self-explanatory. Positional power, it comes with a title and a position. Networking power, there are people within the organization who are just good at networking. They're very influential because of those networks. They may not have the position, but nevertheless, they are able to get done what needs to get done because of their networking ability. Knowledge power, the one who knows what to do, that brings power. And then charisma, personality power. So every organization has power structures, and some are formal, some are informal, but it's important that we navigate those power structures. And then we move to culture. And what is culture? Culture is the shared assumptions within an organization that are developed over time. And it's considered the right way to do things, just based on the fact that this is our experience, we've done this before, and it worked before, so it must be right. And so that's a culture within an organization. And sometimes that culture is right and sometimes it's wrong, but it's important that we understand the culture of the organization. So to assess that culture, what do? We look at the visible artifacts within that organization, and we read the documents of that organization, the espoused theory, but then we also observe the theory in use. Does the actions that are occurring within that organization actually line up with the documentation? And so assessing that culture means that we are observant, that we're seeing the artifacts that exist, that we're reading these documents, and that we're observing to make sure we understand what the culture is. And then those organizational politics and that culture helps us to understand the process of change. So I have whizzed through what I had as a 45-minute lecture. I've uploaded the PowerPoint so you can go through that to help you. But I trust that just highlighting these things will help you. And I promise that next week it'll be in a lot sooner and maybe in more depth. God bless you is my prayer. If you have any questions or concerns, please let me know.